Cyrus, a knight in shining armor, is an honest and brave man, but recently he made a mistake and activated the system. The people he admired and trusted evoke the deepest and highest feelings of his heart. But now the peace has left him. The information with which they were sent to the dungeon was incorrect. The level of monsters here was extremely high. People were not morally prepared for it. The strongest were injured, and those of lower rank fled without even entering combat. Only one could escape, leaving the others to be sacrificed to the demons, and his squadron leader took advantage of that. They were being used as bait, and only now were they realizing. Until now, Cyrus had not faced a battle against demon Senin, but he was already defeating ignorant humans with ease and wondered about the power of human bravery, most likely recklessness. How weak and powerless humans were compared to his power. They might amuse him a little, but compared to his king, they were too bad. The girl smiled. Participating in the battle was the demon queen and princess of the south. Her red eyes enjoyed the helplessness of humans. Not far from Cyrus, leaning on her sword, was Bella, carrying the title of Class D hero. She begged Cyrus to flee this horrible place faster. The monsters were too strong. He had to leave her behind and not worry about her. There was no need for a brave F-level to act like a hero. However, our hero disagreed with her. He had come here to provide protection to humanity, so he couldn't flee at such a critical moment. He assured Bella that there was no need to worry about him because he would take care of the enemies. Meanwhile, Princess Joke walked slowly around the room, stretching out of boredom. People were too weak to catch her attention in any way, and they couldn't even entertain her. Just looking at the beautiful body of the demon princess made the boy's nose bleed, causing the girl begging him to leave to worry. No man would run from this fight. Bella kept telling him to flee, that it made no sense to stay there watching the demons. She could no longer face anyone, let alone protect anyone. The girl kept trying to reason with him, but it was all in vain. At the same time, goblin servants approached the queen and pointed to the guy who was still standing and holding a sword. They wanted their leader to correct this misunderstanding as soon as possible. She and her subordinate rushed and gave the order to kill him. The boy didn't move from his seat, waiting for the approaching enemy who was about to make a vase of his head for his beloved king. Before being attacked, he activated the love tree particle skill. The SS demon's eyes burned with excitement as she approached the guy, of whom soon there would be nothing left. However, the young man was against such a decision from the demonic, so activating the skill was now very useful. The queen stopped beside the boy. She was several times larger than Cyrus and had no trouble grabbing his head with one hand. She slowly brought her fangs to the boy's face, who didn't react in any way and watched silently. It seemed that only a moment was missing for her to pierce him with her sharp teeth, releasing the blood that ran down his cheek. But that's not what happened. Instead, she kissed him, which thanks to his system added 100 points to his attack state, thus increasing his characteristic. This system could continuously increase his combat efficiency. Bella was stunned, looking at the guy who was enjoying the process. She didn't expect this to happen on the battlefield and only asked the panicked guy what he was doing. The goblins were also puzzled by the unexpected actions of the princess, so they tried to fix things. However, Cyrus could not allow the interruption of his skill, and so, Cyrus saw the approach of the demoness subordinates and immediately wielded his sword, which he had kept in his hands ready all the time. At that moment, the girl's red eyes opened wide, and now it seemed she was coming to her senses. She jumped away from the enemy to a safe distance. Her tail, suing Cyrus, seemed displeased with what had happened and nervously wiped her lips while the blushing beauty watched her puzzled. Not even the silver-haired queen herself understood what had happened. She wanted to kill him, but for some reason, she didn't. The girl was sure the fault lay with the little man who was now being scolded. He spoke of the safety of the citizens for whom he was sick. Even if his entire body was destroyed, he would not hesitate. Cyrus swore he would fight to the end. While the goblins continued to whisper behind him, they couldn't believe their mistress had kissed a human. But there had been rumors before, like she had found a lover outside. It seemed it was true. The other monster also confirmed what was said, but they hadn't expected it to turn out to be a human. Now they weren't surprised that this guy remained calm in front of them. However, one of the subordinates interrupted their gossip. They were too arrogant. These fools dared to doubt the princess's feelings for the king. They are monsters and therefore different from people who engage in dirty things like betrayal, treason, and fraud. The fact that he spoke in favor of the queen confirmed his loyalty. However, no one should have told the king that she kissed a human. But it was so strange, his heart was beating too fast. That's where the killing ability of Quota missed a help. Even 15% was enough to create delusions. The demoness was ruthless because the original task was to kill the people he had ordered to be done. All the servants lunged at the guy who was only armed with a sword and armor. He trusted them and their skills. The demon, who was several times larger than the guy, wielded his axe, towering over him. Cirrus reacted instantly and wielded his sword in the air, hoping to deflect the attack. However, the axe hit the ground where the guy stood, destroying everything in its path. Cirrus only survived by dodging. Even his sword broke with a single blow, shattering as if it were cheap glass. Panic set in, and he continued to grip the handle of his now useless sword while monsters crowded around him. The princess's orders were very clear, and no one was going to mess with this man. One by one, the demons raised their weapons hoping to cut the guy's flesh, but Cirrus persisted. Although there was nothing to stop the blows, he continued to dodge the attacks. His defense didn't rise, but his attack power increased by 100 units, which was already quite good. He had to take advantage of it. Grasping the sword with both hands, he wielded the remaining weapon and managed to break the handle of the double axe while dealing with one demon. Another approached him stealthily from behind, eager for victory and to receive praise from the princess. Our hero saw the sudden attack and turned towards the goblin, dragging his iron clogs on the ground. As he turned, he put all his strength into the blow, trying to inflict maximum damage. He struck the demon who had dared to carry out such a treacherous plan. Bella, who was still sitting by the rock, marveled at the guy's skill. He had really managed to throw the monster away. The strength she could see was not something an F-class hero should possess. Meanwhile, Cirrus continued to fight, regretting not having torn the demon in half. Now he was only scratched and even more angry. He approached our hero threateningly, even without a weapon, instilling terror in people's hearts. The level of these monsters was undoubtedly too high. As he watched, the goblins behind him heard some strange noise again, due to which the protagonist had to turn around. The princess. He didn't stay on the sidelines and also began to join the fight. He aimed to knock the guy to the ground with a single kick, so in a second, he was over his head. The guy managed to cross his arms before the demoness could reach him with her strong leg. Instantly, the ground beneath him cracked, raising a column of dust into the air, thus obscuring his view. Small stones followed the dust, making Bella close her eyes and brace for the explosion. The armed goblins watched in silence the lady's actions, not having the right to interfere in her fight. As the dust settled, the demons could see the southern prince sitting right on top of the annoying warrior who wouldn't surrender. A demon army guy lunged at the motionless boy with a frantic shout and an axe in his hands. Naturally, 3 didn't want to die, and seeing the attacker, began to think of something. However, the demon, so easily scared, acted faster than the man. His tip was almost as fast as the speed of sound, so when he hit the attacking goblin, he created a loud noise, throwing him aside. The rest of his troops also stopped in their tracks, frozen in confusion. The demon landed on his back with a dull thud, his armor clattered, and he dodged the axe he had accidentally let fly. The minions waited in silence for their princess to explain herself. She didn't hesitate and at the same time asked everyone to listen to her. From that moment on, she prohibited her subordinates from doing anything, as the troublemaker would become her meal. The silver-haired queen continued to hold the guy while observing his stats. His anxiety index was at 91, as she herself didn't quite understand what was happening, but what she felt delighted. The subordinates admired their lady who had effortlessly subdued the person causing them trouble. The princess's fangs gleamed again when she opened her mouth, ready to bite him to death. Naturally, Sirius was still alive and watched in fear as the demon held his head and continued to approach. Suddenly, his ears began to deform and also became oblong like those of monsters, but after a second, they returned to normal when his defense increased by 50 units after the sudden kiss from the girls. Everything had a price he had to pay for more power. Letting him and an honest man experience such a thing was simply an insult to his personality. However, it was incomparable to the safety of the city's people. None of that mattered. He was willing to endure being insulted by such behavior. The southern princess realized she had become somewhat strange but accepted it. In fact, the fact that she took the initiative to do something like this to a man was different from her usual behavior. Why did it happen? She's a powerful monster after all and could have stopped it instantly, but the girl's body was no longer under control. At this moment, the guy's agility had reached 120 units, which couldn't be avoided. The goblins still believed their mistress was just killing that man, but some still doubted what they saw. Only one demon who had sided with the princess from the beginning kept saying that the girl was just looking for the man's weak point so that in future battles, she would fight more effectively. And since the others didn't understand this, it would be better if they kept quiet. While those continued to speak heresies, the guy's defense increased to 130, and strength to 150. Now his stats had reached the right amount to face this group of monsters. It was his turn to counterattack. Sirius raised his hand, gripping the hilt of his sword to strike. The goblins noticed the man's tortuous movements, so they warned the princess to be careful. The silver-haired demoness clung to the hero's arm with her tail, restricting his movements. Unfortunately, against the demon ruler, these stats were not enough. He needed to accumulate more strength. The king grabbed the guy by the neck and slammed his body against the nearest wall. The goblins began to praise the lady as they realized they were wrong to question her intentions. She did want to kill him. The Queen of the South didn't take her eyes off the man and brushed off the dust that had risen from the impact. Still, she had to restrain herself a bit, putting her hand to the man's armor, pressing him harder against the stone. A tiny human dared to face her monsters. However, the princess had no desire to kill him. With a single movement of her hand, she tore off the armor that only hindered him. The demoness wanted people to see with their own eyes the difference between their weak bodies and the monsters. From the beginning of the battle, she wanted to see what the man was capable of, so she rejoiced when he managed to please her subordinates. Such a move from the girl was quite exciting to the enthusiastic goblins who watched her movements attentively. The man's armor shattered. It seemed that since they could destroy it so easily, there was no point in opposing the monsters with the armor. However, the man's face of confusion changed when he saw the extended and frozen hand of the princess. He hoped she would stay like that. In that case, he would be able to hold on. They wouldn't get any closer. He continued approaching the man who tried to maintain composure. After the next kiss, the skill's value increased by 100%. The girl's strength impressed the man so much that he couldn't move, only clenching his teeth. The demoness used all her skills to chain the man, and it was perfectly fine. Our hero stretched out his arm helplessly, asking for help, but the valiant ones with whom they set out on the raid were no longer there. His current strength was not at all enough to defeat these monsters, so they only expected the worst outcome. Bella, who was still sitting near the rock, blushed at the kisses she saw and could do nothing for the safety of the city. Saris was willing to sacrifice his principles to achieve peace, all in the name of good. Convinced of himself, the boy leaned towards the demon, getting closer to him. He wanted to change the outcome of the battle and thus increase his statistics within minutes. His agility jumped to 200, defense to 300, and concentration to 450. Sensitivity, intelligence, resistance, and magic overall broke the ceiling and showed values around 1. Strength increased to 100 units and kept increasing. Meanwhile, the demon who came to help stopped a few dozen meters from them. He was dressed in black armor and carried a sword that would have left the unfortunate humans on the ground wet. The demon only had time to whisper his wife's name before being discovered and dropping the sword in confusion. The princess turned to her king, lowered her gaze, and continued to remain silent. Everyone was deeply shocked by the situation, causing silence in the cave. Everyone focused their gaze on King Barrett, who had been morally critically struck. Meanwhile, the man who managed to free himself from the princess's strong arms stared at the notice saying that now all bonus values would double, and his level would increase by 1. But silence couldn't last forever. A few seconds later, a furious scream from the king echoed through the cave, promising to destroy our hero. The mana released from his body was surprisingly enormous. His power even broke the ground he stood on. However, seeing Barrett's anger, the silver-haired devil began to deny it and assured him it wasn't what he thought, asking for a chance to explain. But for Sirius, it was unnecessary. He already expected to have reached the appropriate level. Barrett's eyes expressed the horror filling his heart at the betrayal to the queen he trusted. With all his anger, the demon turned to Sirius, yelling at him to stay away from the woman he loved. His movements were so fast that only a blur could be seen. The Painicho of his aura wielded a sword in front of the boy, but luckily, the young man had his broken sword at hand, which he used to soften the blow. The remnants of his armor flew off and shattered on the ground. The young man was thrown so far that he found himself near Bella, who was at the other end of the cave. The girl was worried about him and immediately ran towards him, asking if he was okay. However, the guy managed to absorb enough demonic power and increase his defense before the appearance of the king. He stood up and still managed to withstand it, which reassured his companion a bit. During the last attack, the Demon King instantly appeared in front of our hero, who couldn't help but be amazed. Not only was the speed but also the strength of the attack great. He was extremely tall, which necessitated thinking of an escape plan. The merchant promised the king that this would not happen again. But what did he see? Now the queen sat on her knees in front of him and looked away. Still, she had in front of her a king of level A. Barrett stirred in Geneva, awaiting an answer. He had promised her last time that he would not look at another man, but now she was looking at a completely different one. However, Princess Yu was not going to listen quietly to other people's complaints since the cause of everything was in the king himself. She was angry, shouting, and asking why on earth he had arrived so late. In a second, she managed to silence the king, who was left confused and frozen. Not even the subordinates dared to move or raise their voices. They continued in silence, watching the confrontation. The queen kept saying that Barrett was to blame for everything. If he hadn't arrived so late, she wouldn't have made the same mistake twice. The demon was wrong in his actions but still had the courage to ask him such stupid and threatening questions. She didn't let him get a word in as she continued to attack the king. If he had been walking for so long, what was the serious man doing? She asked, pointing at him and demanding an immediate answer. He thought for too long, which offended the girl, and she moved away from him. Barrett begged his beloved not to be angry and admitted he was wrong. He had recently realized the number of people fleeing the cave and had gone to take care of them, which is why he hadn't come to her immediately. The king promised her that next time this would not happen and begged her to forgive him. The goblins watched in amazement as their king really felt great affection for his mistress. He was even willing to bow his head and admit mistakes. So it was no wonder he could marry a monstrous woman like the princess. The level of trust between the subordinate and the king remained high, so one of them wanted to remain single while the other was impressed by what he saw and decided to declare his love to the young lady the next day. Still, it was a good time to escape while they were having a family quarrel. Cirrus wanted to slip out of sight as soon as possible. Right now, the difference between him and this monster was too great. The princess continued to shout and cry under the constellations. The king was heartbroken by her tears. At this, the goblins had their own conversation and asked their colleague not to get involved in the argument because he would beat him up. In this indignation, the young man helped Bella to her feet, asking if she could walk. If she couldn't, he would carry her. However, the girl declined the help, even though she had a broken leg, but that was nothing to her. The princess continued to play the innocent sheep, accusing Barrett of all the sins. He arrived late, and that's why the men managed to seduce her. Her loyal and pure love was almost tarnished. The man reassured her and shifted the blame to Cirrus. Remembering the man, the king's face twisted toward the boy, and the man whispered that he would kill him. The princess shouldn't feel bad, so it was worth destroying the guilty one. But the silver-haired girl stopped the man, falling at his feet. The king was the love of her life, and even if they died, they would be together in oblivion. How could she love other men? Her plan was cunning, but feasible. He entertained himself until the last moment because the demon was immobilized, screaming to his foolish subordinates to stop the men fleeing while the girl told him she liked his majestic and dominant gaze. However, the goblins couldn't follow Barrett's orders. Some time ago, the princess had ordered them not to interfere in the battle, but the king only got angry at the meeting of fools and launched the attack himself, leaving his queen alone. The humans couldn't get far, so it wasn't difficult for the demon king to attack them. In an instant, he reached them, knocking down the roof and causing rocks to fall on the heroes. Cirrus moved the paralyzed girl aside when the demon king appeared personally in front of them. He was furious because the young man dared to seduce his favorite woman, so he wasn't going to spare any effort. With a single movement of his hand, the boy took flight, destroying everything in his path at great speed and letting out the same cry of pain. The guy buzzed past the king's subordinates and was thrown back to the princess, who continued sitting on his lap, breathing heavily and superficially, feeling the pain in his chest. His ribs seemed to be broken, making it even harder for him to defend against that damn demon's attack. The speed was too fast to keep up with. Now he was no match for him. The demon was only determined to ruthless bloodshed. So, he headed in the direction the man had flown, even though the queen remained close to him. The king didn't stop. Barrett threatened to tear him apart as soon as he reached him. He wished with all his heart that Cirrus would pay with his life for what he had done, but he had no other choice. All he could do was keep resisting, but the boy didn't expect the system to fail and freeze for use. The young man's eyes opened wide, and a scream full of terror came out of his mouth. He only saw the knife blade in front of him passing a millimeter from his head, but a sudden slap made everyone come to their senses, drawing everyone's attention. The princess slapped her king, not allowing him to harm her. Thanks to that, the weapon passed to the right of Cirrus's head, who was writhing and convulsing. Barrett, unaware of what was happening, froze with his head turned to the side. The boy's life was about to be cut short. So, as soon as he heard the queen's voice, he immediately stood up while the king asked his beloved why she had done it. Cyrus was already running towards the exit. Tears sprouted from the eyes of the horrible and cruel king after his beloved hit him. He felt real pity for the man, even for all the questions the king was interested in. The woman only showed her tongue while smiling cheerfully. At that moment, another notification of a critical morale blow to the king with a level increase appeared in front of Cyrus. He had managed to increase his level again. But would he be able to win if he fought against the Demon King now? There was no time to think about it. So, he decided to face him alone when he was at a safe distance, but for now, he would try to dodge the hot hand. Meanwhile, the silver-haired demoness looked in the direction of the guy as he distanced himself. She could no longer contain her desire. The king thought his queen had lost her mind when she began to free herself from his arms towards the man. A moment ago, she had sworn him unlimited love. So, he held her back, not allowing her to reach him. But the princess kept resisting, and finally succeeded, freeing her hand instantly and began to run away from him. He couldn't stand it anymore, so he chased after our fleeing hero. Finally getting close enough to Cyrus, he pounced on him. She was eager to release her feelings. The boy heard a noise behind him and turned his head, confused by this maneuver. Unaware that demons could jump so far, she clung to him in a hug, pressing him to the ground. Without realizing, she increased the boy's survival capacity to 180 units. The Demon King got up frustrated and stretched out the hand that had held his beloved just a second ago. But in the boy, concentration grew by 140 while the young man suffered under the weight of the demoness. Her strength increased another 210 points, and her perception by 140. Now he didn't resist and let the princess do whatever she wanted. To increase statistics and save people just thinking about it, their agility also increased. The king observed the queen's confused behavior as she struggled to choose her words. He didn't understand why she acted that way. Maybe it was because he wasn't good enough. He had convinced himself that it was his fault, but now he was here, willing to redeem himself. When the king kills that man, everything will return to normal. However, the silver-haired demonic woman refused to accept her old life. She shouted at the demon and asked him to leave, leaving her and the man alone. Such a statement left even the demon king speechless. None of those present expected to hear from Princess Barrett. He immediately fell to his knees, refusing to accept his beloved's response. He was doing his best to preserve their relationship, but that despicable man had thwarted him. Meanwhile, Bella, although with one leg, ran to rescue her companion. She ordered the shameless demon to release Cyrus and, holding her sword in front of her, ran to the rescue, justifying her rank. The heroine of the class attacked the wicked princess who dared to immobilize her friend. But Cyrus suddenly and inexplicably asked her to stay behind. Princess was not only dangerous with her limbs but also with her tail, which had an arrow shape. She quickly wrapped it around Cyrus, preventing him from attacking, wrapping around his arms and waist. The demon slammed her against the wall, embedding the tip of his tail like a nail into the hard rock above Bella's head. The joke itself kept kissing our hero. No matter how much she turned, she never found the answer to why she liked that guy. All she clearly knew was that he was no longer human. However, deep down, touching the young man brought her joy. Each rose gave her a sense of happiness without reason, raising the hero's power level. However, one must not forget about Barrett. He would not tolerate his betrayal. Princess Ju kept lying to him all the time, leading him by the nose for a long time. The Demon King shouted with all his might that he would not give up. He roamed the cave, forcing his subordinates to cover their ears. He called the demonic woman every nasty word he could remember at that moment. He had been betrayed, desperate. The king,